can best facilitate that. He came again and did a discussion on existentialism, and today he's volunteered to share his journey on a topic that I, and many that I know, have at one time or another grappled with. He introduces some interesting points on radical skepticism, and it has a place in the transcendent joy of spirituality. So I'm so happy to have him here to share his thoughts and give us some insight on at least one person's evolution. So without further commentary, let's welcome Kurt.
I want to start by telling you all about a time I was maybe 9 years old, and I was out doing a family activity at a go-kart ranch. It was a family reunion, and I, of course, wanted to drive the go-kart. So, I don't know how much of this was just my dad bribing people or sweet-talking people or whatever, but I was able to get put in the driver's seat of a go-kart with a company attendant watching me. Now, the company attendant had to go start the thing, and I was left alone for maybe half a minute is all. But I was really excited, kind of nudged on the pedal just a little without realizing it. The thing moved forward. The lady from, I don't know how far away she was, putting all the data in the machine, freaked out and she yelled, "Whoa!" Now me and my overexcited brain, I thought she said, "Go!" So I went, and I crashed into a bumper, or the wall. And so all because she said, "Whoa," and I heard "go." And really, if you're an overexcited 8-year-old, it's not that difficult to mishear that. So anyways, I brought that story up because when you're talking about things like spirituality and skepticism and science, we all have different things we're wanting to hear. I was wanting to hear "go," and so "whoa" sounded an awful lot like "go" to me, because it's a lot more fun to be able to go pedal to the metal and crash into the wall, I guess, than it is to stop and wait. So, I want to just clarify at the outset my definition for spirituality and skepticism. So, spirituality, I think, to all of us means something slightly different. Maybe it evokes a picture of a temple or another religious place of worship where you've had sacred experiences for you. Maybe it's nature. Maybe it's humans working together cooperatively. Whatever it is, we all have this pre-built, pre-programmed, biased way of looking at the world. So my bias for spirituality is anything that, the way I think of it in my head, is gets us in touch with the immediacy of things. In other words, revealing our space and place and relationship to other people with just enough awareness for us to do the next best thing that we can do. So it's a little different than most people think of the word spirituality. For me, it's more, what is it that is going to make me do the best thing I can right now? And so I'm just going to quickly address some of the common, especially in the secular community, spiritualities that we often deal with, that many of us often gravitate towards. And I'm not attacking any of these. In fact, some of these are things I adopt. I just want us to get to think about these issues a little more critically. So the first that a lot of people kind of gravitate towards with spirituality that I've seen is what I like to call the spirituality of empathetic connection. In other words, for a lot of people, and I agree with a lot of this, by the way, but we're all people, we're all feeling pretty much the same things, thinking pretty much the same kind of thoughts. We're much more similar than we are different. And we're all a part of something much bigger than us. And so the point of life is to follow our empathy. You know, we see other people around us hurting, ease their pain. Neil deGrasse Tyson perhaps put it best when he said, no more today than you did yesterday, and also work to alleviate the suffering of others. That's kind of a very popular sort of catch-all spirituality. And I think that would be a great way to live our lives if we had enough data to actually do it. So I'm saying, yes, empathy can have a place in our lives, but the way I prefer to look at it is rational compassion. In other words, well, first I want to say a little bit why I've become skeptical of just our immediate emotional, empathetic reactions to things. You know, the idea that we can know what it's like to be someone else and put ourselves in their place, walk a mile in their shoes. And I think that's actually kind of dangerous because we can't do it. The example I bring up most often with this is me being blind all my life is something that is not that big of a deal in and of itself. But because people try and empathize and say, wow, I wonder what it must be like to be in that situation, you have to ultimately guess, and you're going to guess wrong a lot. And I think because of that ambiguity that is always present between people, we need to actually be skeptical of our impulse to try and relate and understand, because I think that makes us understand better. So in my mind, empathy is maybe a good starting point, but if we want to really do a constructive, helpful thing in the world and make things better, it requires a lot more than just thinking we've built some kind of picture where we actually understand everything completely. And that brings me to the second form of spirituality people often have, which has been expressed rather poetically as the universe trying to understand itself. Or even, we are the universe that understands itself. It's a very poetic way of kind of affirming science and progress and experimenting and learning more through trial and error as time goes on and actually understanding how the world works around us. And I'm not saying that's all wrong, but I am saying I think that's a little bit more limited than we think it is, for reasons that people in science often tell us. Chief among them, funding. Studies are often, well, I mean, you have to get money from somewhere. And why would people want to pay for scientific research? Well, to try and promote a certain point of view, often. And so there are things we can do to make science less prone to that kind of abuse, but it's still going to be there. Another thing is, I mean, any serious scientist now that I've heard will emphasize how incomplete our picture of reality is. In other words, yes, we're understanding a lot more than we used to, but compared to the unknown unknowns, the things we don't quite have a handle on yet, and maybe never will because they're too complicated for our tiny little human brains, those things are probably always going to be beyond us. In other words, based on history so far, it's a lot better to assume that our picture of the world is less complete than we think it is, and we're a lot more wrong than we think we are. So, going along with this idea of understanding the universe and becoming more aware of what's happening in the hopes that we you will act more in harmony with it. Or at least in a way that will make it, as far as we can tell, better because we acted that way. Science is great at giving us pieces of understanding, but we're a lot farther away, I think, from grasping the whole picture than a lot of optimistic people would have us believe. So, counterpointing that spirituality of understanding, I would actually add something that has been meaningful for me in my life, which is, if you want to really learn stuff that's new, you want to really find out where you're wrong and get a little less wrong over time, the thing we need is actually cognitive dissonance. And a lot of people, we've been burned by that in the past perhaps, or we have been so aware of some time we've been drastically wrong before about something big, that we don't stop to realize that those biases we have to validate our own perceptions of how things are can actually be challenged. And we can work to learn more, come a little closer to how things actually are, but that requires, honestly, some suffering. Because, is cognitive dissonance comfortable? I don't recall it being, when you have something you think you're completely right about and you open yourself to honestly finding, and I'm talking in any domain of life, right? I'm not just talking religion or politics or, ethics or whatever. But when we really question any of our assumptions and find out, hey, there might actually be a way to look at this that makes a little more sense than the way I thought before, that opens us up to a lot of emotional turmoil. And so I think it's important to actually live the kind of life, paradoxically, where you trust yourself enough to be open to pain, to be open to things that aren't comfortable, that are going to hurt like heck, but that are, I'm not going to say designed to make us grow, because reasonable people can disagree on that one, I think. But I am going to say opportunities for us to slowly become slightly more like the people we want to be. To me, that's the critical thing, is finding that way to actually do the right thing we need to do. And being willing to set yourself up for an intellectually and emotionally more challenging life in the hopes that you will be beneficial to other people because of it. And so that's to me, that's kind of spirituality, and that's one force that I'm trying to cultivate in my life. Now, on the other side of the coin, I'll just briefly touch on skepticism and then open for questions. Skepticism is another loaded word that has a lot of different meanings and ways it's interpreted and applied. So there's one kind of skeptic thinking, Richard Dawkins type, Michael Shermer, James Randi, ghost debunkers. And that's certainly a mostly skeptical thing to be doing. But skepticism can also mean a stream of thoughts that can come about in response to realizing you don't know as much as you think you do. More broadly even than just promoting science. As an example of this would be, how do we know we're not dreaming right now? And I am not seriously saying that we're all in a dream right now. But can't actually prove 100% certainty that we aren't. And so that kind of skepticism, while if you take it to its extreme, is actually a paradox that kind of falls apart, because if you say you know nothing, then you at least know you know nothing, so you know something. But I think that skepticism can help us get rid of explanations that are less likely to be true than the ones that we stumble onto as we keep rigorously trying to figure out our place in the world around us. And so in my mind, the kind of the goal is to be so skeptical that I'm opening myself up to the cognitive dissonance of being wrong, but at the same time affirm life. And this actually brings me to a very ironic thing that happened. I stumbled onto the writings and perspective of a lot of people in the New Age community, and I'm not making any statement on that one way or another. I will say it goes beyond a lot of what science seems to be telling us about the world, I think. But it's actually in that kind of thinking that I have found a lot of my ethics. For instance, the power of positive thinking, although I call it affirmative thinking because positive thinking people misunderstand and think, well, you know, if I just have a happy enough attitude, things are going to get better. And I don't think life works like that, but I think the power of affirmative thinking in the sense of whatever it is for each of us that brings us back to the world around us as it actually is. With the goal of doing the best things we can to make it a better place around us. And I know that kind of sounds cliche, but it really isn't, because if we look within ourselves, I think, at least I've found, a few core values of how I want to improve the world. Chief among them, the idea of rational compassion as opposed to just empathy without being paired with critical thinking. So I'll close there if there are any questions or comments or concerns or criticisms or whatever.
Kurt, I had one. This is Jeff Tully.
Cool.
So you say challenging yourself.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? What kind of ways do you openly challenge yourself to push yourself to get that cognitive dissonance?
That's a good question. So I would say, and it's hard because I don't want to say, oh, suffering's a good thing. Like a lot of people who go to that extreme would be like, oh, well, you know, people should be left to go hungry because that'll build character. So I'm not taking it to that level. But what I am saying is I think suffering in pursuit of other things that we have decided are worth it, which could be more than just selfish things is what I'm trying to get at. Things that actually will enrich the people around us as far as we're able to say or determine. And so I can't really answer the question. I mean, I can say for me, a lot of it is actually somehow reading fiction humanizes me and helps me be a more ethical person. You know, appreciating art, but also actually going out and, you know, finding ways to give back is what I'm going after here. So, I guess whatever cause we think is worthwhile to us that is not just self-directed, that is trying to make people around us better, is the thing that's worth suffering for.
If you submit yourself to experiencing more cognitive dissonance, would you say that a primary motivation for that would be to get a more accurate view of reality?
Yes, but, oh sorry, I interrupted, carry on.
That's it, that's my main question.
Yes, but at the same time, realizing that we're dealing with shades of gray as far as accuracy, so, you know, maybe I'll be 3% accurate instead of 2% accurate. Or maybe I'll be, you know, 75% accurate instead of 40% accurate. I think what I'm saying is curiosity and working towards the idea that we might be actually getting more accurate matters more than, you know, actually being accurate or not. I think trying to be accurate is the thing, because we'll never quite get there.
That makes sense to me, because if you're trying to be more accurate, that means you haven't settled into a spot where you're sure you're right.
Right. So, so that actually brings me the other side that I've realized is important, is if we're trying to change things around us, it's only accurate, or it's only fair, I guess, is putting it a little bit crudely, but I think it's only right that we let people around us change us as well. And as far as actually being challenged, other people are valuable for us because they're change agents. They can expose us to different ways of thinking that we haven't thought before. And we have to be open to at least accepting that into our mind. You know, I found in my life that's really the reason to try and reconcile the skepticism and spirituality, is so that I am getting changed by people around me and becoming a little less wrong over time, hopefully, while at the same time becoming a little more constructive and trying to build something around me that's better than what it was before I was here.
Would you say that's the point of being less wrong?
Yeah, for me.
Can we take maybe one more question?
Yeah.
Maybe wrap up? Is anybody else?
What was your first introduction to feeling this way about cognitive dissonance? What was the biggest change in your life?
Oh, go ahead.
No, that was brought about by recognizing the difference between what you believed and what you thought may be more accurate.
So, I think it happened over a few years. I was maybe 12, 13 years old when I had a realization or an understanding that might not be complete, obviously, but a feeling that no matter what I did or didn't do, there would always be this kind of emptiness in me that I'm probably not going to be able to satisfy. In other words, I found out that I'm kind of discontent, I guess. And there can be good in that happening. So for me, it was about, I was 12, 13. Then I had a few years where I was totally just questioning and re-examining all of my assumptions. And I think now I've kind of managed to put that kind of questioning into just sort of a passive, always on in the back of my head thing that at certain times I can engage with more than other times, depending on, you know, it's the goal to fine-tune my understanding or to actually do the best thing I can now. So I think there are different levels, and it's okay.